Okay, so hey guys and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my reaction to the Della Maddalena win via unanimous decision versus Belal Muhammad. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So it was a great, to be fair, fight between two guys who clearly were warriors and clearly wanted to give their all and clearly, were willing to make a fight that entertaining. And I think beyond anything, that's just what I wanted to see, especially from Muhammad. He's not a boring fighter that people brand him as. I think he does have, entertaining fights, and his style, yes, isn't going to be knocking out everybody, and yes, a lot of the time does go to decision, but it is a good, efficient style typically. But for this fight, I said that I wanted to see a more entertaining Belal, one that was more like Della, who, yes, is quite often seen as somebody who has quite a negative, just pure wrestling style, in which perhaps isn't, again, the most entertaining and will, suffocate you to a decision victory. But it's the way that he goes about his fights that's more entertaining. The fact he'll play with his opponents and, look for entertaining elements, and just little things like kissing his opponent or shouting at the opponent's coach or something like that. Just little things that we've seen him do in fights, where it does make it more entertaining, and but it still also suits his game plan. Belal kind of did something a bit different for this fight. It seemingly was the case where, it didn't seem like he forgot his game plan, but it seemed like he wasn't, he was definitely fighting more of a fight in which Della Maddalena wanted to fight. And it could definitely be mind games. I mean, there's been plenty of fights in which we've seen where one fighter has prepared so heavily for another fighter's style, in which, you could see that Della Maddalena definitely prepared heavily for Muhammad's style. Definitely prepared heavily for Muhammad's style, where he was able to, have a lot of success when he was trying to go for takedowns, because Della Maddalena didn't get taken down, and well, he did, but he managed to survive a lot of it. And like I say, for the most part he did well in that aspect, and you could see that he was definitely preparing for Belal to just continuously go for takedowns. And so in that aspect Della Maddalena did really well. But then Belal, you could see that he was training and preparing for somebody who was gonna be striking on the feet. He wanted to showcase that he could strike on the feet and not just get completely, outdone on the feet. But to be fair to him, that wasn't something that went into his favour. He definitely didn't fight the best on his feet, and that's obvious. I think he had little bits of success, but for the most part, he was coming in with such little head movement. I liked JDM's footwork. I think that was solid at times. I think it took a round or two for him to get used to switching his styles and to do it efficiently. But when he did, I think it looked really good. I think he was able to slip his shots very nicely and sneak through with his straight shots, which he does throw really well. I think in general he definitely is straight kind of striking acclaim to be one of the better boxers in the UFC. Maybe not the best just yet, but that was a really dominating performance from him, and a lot of it was just heavily based around just striking. And in general, the knees were good as well when he landed them, and the elbows were good as well. In general, like I say, it was a very good striking performance, and it definitely was dominating. You can definitely have an argument for him to have won that fight. I think they gave it him 4-1, but 4-1 is very dominating for a UFC championship fight. And so, especially when you're a contender as well. And yeah, in general, that was excellent to see. And now we are going to have to move on with JDM as the new UFC welterweight champion. And he gave it his all. He shows that he can be willing to dig deep and be in a war. So was Muhammad, and perhaps that's more of what we wanted to see from Muhammad. He does get cut quite often, and he does end his fights a lot of the time bleeding. Even against Leon, he was bleeding quite badly, but he always is able to push through for the most part. And just for this fight he couldn't. But both guys were really destroyed on their face, to be fair to him. I mean, Bilal's cut lip was pretty gruesome, but yeah, like I say, now we're going to be able to see Della Maddalena in his first defense up against pound for pound, arguably number one, number two in Islam Makhachev, which is a really, really tough thing to have as your first defense. It's really throwing you at the deep end for JDM, who, yes, has a number one contender who's meant to be really, really tough in Rachmanov, but this is a really tough test against Makhachev. And, Makhachev wants to go for two weight world champion, and, he has full right to do so. He's waited his turn, he's waited around for Belal to see if he was going to be champion or not. He set out his terms. He said that he's going to wait and see what happened in this fight, and that would decide his move. Now it's going to happen. Seemingly, like I say, he is going to try go for two weights champion. Is the UFC going to allow him? I'm not entirely sure. I think so. I mean, there was rumors of the UFC not allowing two weight champions anymore, but it seems like they are willing to do it. Dana White didn't mention the fact. I think he said that Topuria would fight Oliveira if Makhachev moved up for the vacant title, but it's then Makhachev came out and said that he's not vacating his lightweight title. So, it will be very interesting to see just how that all plays out, and to where, if Makhachev has to vacate the title, if it's very interesting to see. But, he has full right not to vacate the title. I mean, Volkanovski, yes, he achieved a lot in his division as well, but when he moved up to fight Makhachev, he didn't have to vacate his belt, and then he went back down and fought for it again. So, he has full right to try and go for two weight champion, and hopefully we'll see that. Hopefully we'll be allowed to do that, because I think Topuria versus Oliveira is still an amazing fight, and definitely one in which I feel like a lot of people are writing out Oliveira in that matchup, but like I say, I think that is an excellent matchup. I think it will be a very difficult contest for Topuria, who I don't think has faced somebody anywhere near with the wrestling capabilities yet of Oliveira, because, we've seen Topuria face Emmett, we've seen him face Holloway, we've seen him face Volkanovski, but none of them are, true wrestlers and haven't got as anywhere near as good a jiu-jitsu as that of Oliveira. So it definitely will be a good fight, that one. And even if it's for an interim title, that's a great fight. And then to see Makhachev versus JDM, I think it will be an entertaining contest as well. JDM obviously has improved a lot in his takedown defense. I think his actual ability on the ground is still lacking a bit, but he was able to get back to his feet well whenever Belal did take him to the ground in this fight. Yes, Belal didn't go to the ground too much, anywhere near as much as everybody expected, but he is improving. If he keeps improving the rate in which he's going, it will be interesting to see. I mean, Makhachev's definitely not going to be somebody to get drawn to fight somebody else's fights, that's for sure. Possibly he could have struggles on the feet against him like a JDM, but we will obviously have to wait and see. Like I say, it's still a good matchup. I think a lot of fans are annoyed that we're not seeing Makhachev versus Topuria, but that's definitely still a fight in which, I think if it makes sense, it will happen. I think, like I say, Makhachev has waited around long enough to get this opportunity to fight for a two weight championship, and now he's getting that opportunity. And so, it's like I say, it's deserved. But if he does beat JDM, he says that he'll be, more than willing to, and wants to go back down to fight the winner of Oliveira versus Topuria. So if Topuria does go on to win, then, like I say, it makes sense. It's gonna happen, and at that point, it's going to be set up for a even bigger fight than it is now, realistically. And so, it's going to be tough for JDM to be able to win. If JDM does win, then then he's got pretty much just a contender there ready waiting in Rachmanov, who's, to be fair, has been forgotten about realistically in the way of these talks, because he was meant to be fighting Belal, and obviously the way that everything's worked out, he has been pushed aside due to his injury, similar to that of Sarukian as well. Two guys in which has just been pushed aside due to injury. It's really ruthless, the UFC rankings, and the way that it's all working out, because Rachmanov has worked hard to be in this position, but realistically now, if Makhachev comes up and wins the title, then he's going to go back down. Is he going to keep the title at welterweight as well? If he goes back down to fight the winner of Topuria versus Oliveira, then that means we're going to be waiting even longer for a welterweight champion to fight again. And so it's going to be tricky to see how it all works out. And to be fair, personally, if we look in the welterweight rankings, I would like to see Belal versus Ian Gary next. I think that's a fight in which could definitely make sense and could be interesting to see. Then I would like to see Rachmanov versus Sean Brady. Sean Brady, like I say, is coming off a great win versus Edwards, who, Edwards, he did lose to Belal quite badly, and everybody's questioning just actually how good Edwards is realistically. People are saying that he luckily beat Usman and didn't realistically do loads to win that fight, and then lost really badly to Belal, and now has just lost really badly to Brady. So people are questioning his ability, and it seems like Edwards doesn't want to face a wrestler anymore. So give him something like a Michael Venom Page. That would be a good fight. I'd be more than excited to see that in England as a fight night. So there's some good matchups there in the welterweight scene, in the and in the lightweight scene as well. Like I say, there's some good fights there to be made as well. So it will be interesting to see. Something like a Sarukian and a Rakhmonov are definitely going to be exciting to see what happens with both of them, because neither of them has anything set in stone at the moment. Will they just wait out for another title shot to come their way? Possibly, but we will have to wait and see. Going on to speak about a couple of other fights that were on this card. Shevchenko, of course, won by unanimous decision to retain her UFC flyweight title against Manon Fiorot. That wasn't the most entertaining of contests. I mean, Shevchenko was having success on the feet. Fiorot was using her strength up against the cage a bit, wasn't doing anything too crazy to follow it up. Shevchenko wasn't throwing loads, which wasn't, making it that exciting. She had Fiorot hurt in round 4 and seemingly was going to stop her and get her out of there, like I predicted. But then the bell went and obviously the round ended, so that was quite frustrating, and that definitely would have made the fight a little bit more exciting. But it still happened. It wasn't an awful fight. I mean, people are definitely very harsh to just slander women's title fights because perhaps they're not always ending in stoppages or aren't regularly ending in stoppages. But Shevchenko is still a very, very good champion, up to 10 defenses now, or 10 title fights, or something like that in the real kind of history books of just great as a great champion. And now she's gonna move on, like I say, possibly go on to fight Zhang Weili next. That's a fight in which everybody would like to see two champions up against each other, but it will be interesting to see how the weight would work between the two of them. But possibly that could happen next, or with a new challenger that is Natalie Silva, who of course beat Alexa Grasso. That could be a good fight to be made as well. So I think the division's not dead yet, the flyweight division, and there definitely is still some good matchups there to be made. Of course, Blanchfield still floating about as well. And then one which was a bit of a shame to see, Jose Aldo lost via unanimous decision, as Aiemann Zahabi won via, like I say, unanimous decision. It was definitely a close fight, one in which I was surprised to see that Zahabi won by unanimous decision. I'm surprised no judges gave it the way of Aldo or even gave it a split draw. It was lots of people calling it controversial. A lot of people saying Aldo are robbed. I think Aldo is just a really popular fighter, and I think if it was going to be a close fight, especially for a retirement fight, everybody would have liked to have seen him, go out with a win. So that's why a lot of people are annoyed that he didn't get that decision, but he still made it entertaining. I mean, I think he definitely came out a bit too quickly. I think he was trying to maybe walk through Zahabi, or at least, let out a few pent up frustrations. But he was definitely a bit tight and just, like I say, walking forward, trying to let all his hands go straight away. And, he won that first round, but in the second round, he had to, slow it down a little bit. And then the third round, he came out of nowhere and landed a big, I believe it was a big knee, and then followed it up with a nice soccer kick or football kick. But yeah, then he went from there, got taken down completely, was gassed out, and Zahabi was landing the decent ground and pound, nothing crazy, but decent ground and pound, and it was enough for him to win the round. It was, definitely a round that could have gone either way. Like I say, I'm surprised no judge gave it to Aldo or gave it to draw that round, because it definitely could have been. But inevitably, Zahabi was the winner in his home city, which maybe isn't too much of a surprise. But it was sad to see, because Aldo is a legend. Like I spoke about in my prediction for the card, I definitely would have liked to see Aldo matched up better on his return from retirement against the likes of a Cejudo or a, a Cody Garbrandt. I think there could have been some really good, legend versus legend type of matchups. But it's sad to see. But Aldo, is a legend in his own right. Nobody's going to be able to take that away from him. He's just got this blimp at the end of his record now, which is, like I say, a bit of a shame. But Zahabi now moves on, and will be interesting to see where he goes as a contender next. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, need like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.